Welcome to Backyard Philosophy, a podcast where a couple friends grab some cold ones, sit around the fire, and talk about science, philosophy, and history. Crack one open, sit back, and get a good laugh as we discuss everything from automation to why the meaning of life is 42.
People think that the threat of violence would stop people from defaming one another and all those terrible insults we see on the internet, but history has shown us that that is not the case. We're going to talk about the history of dueling, from its inception, when it was common in society, and kind of when it fizzled out. But before we get to a bunch of people, I'm talking people, not just men, is what people traditionally think. There occasionally women would shoot at each other, and that's equality. Mike, what do you do? How are you doing? What are you drinking?
I'm doing pretty good, my friend. I'm drinking a screwdriver. It's named after a sharp object, but I wouldn't duel with it. How about you? How are you doing? What are you drinking?
One of my favorite beers, some Rogue Dead Guy Ale. Very fitting.
Dead guy.
We do talk about a lot of dead people. So dueling, something that is pretty ingrained in our culture, even though we don't duel the cowboy with the 6-shooter, finger on the trigger, middle of the road. Now, traditionally, that's never happened, but, it never stopped us. The concept of dueling, even if it wasn't called dueling, became a long time ago. Some trace it all the way back to the Viking holmgang, where they would fight each other for property. And in medieval society, this is one of my favorites, a duel where two knights would fight each other. It was in the justice system because the fighting each other, what they thought is that is how God decides who is guilty and who is innocent, because God wouldn't let an innocent man die. So if two men fight, well, the guilty one dies.
Man, if times were like that still, I would be carrying an axe with me everywhere I go.
And what's kind of crazy is because at that time, it didn't have to be equal. Later on, when we get closer to, we're Americans, so we're going to measure everything in relation to the United States. About the birth of America, maybe a couple 100 years or so before that, equality of equal arms was a big part of the code of dueling. But at that time, when it was a legal system of punishment, one guy could bring chainmail, another guy could bring a different form of armor. One guy could have a sword, another guy could have an axe, and it's up to God to decide, literally.
2 men enter, 1 man leave.
Yeah, well, we're going to start in the medieval ages. We're going to end in Thunderdome. Everyone knows that. Not too long after that, people kind of thought maybe this isn't the best way to settle issues, disputes, and duels became more about honor. And that could be anything from someone was talking bad about a certain knight, or someone thought that they said something bad about the king, or so they said something bad about a woman, or all sorts of weird medieval laws that you have that if someone broke one and someone called someone out, well, you could call them to honor. And honor is kind of what drove the whole dueling system until it kind of collapsed. It was really just about who was disrespecting who and who didn't get along with who, and more of an attack on personal character. And honor could only be restored by dueling. If someone called you a coward, the only way to not be a coward is, well, try and fight them.
It seems like chivalry died. Dueling kind of went along with it.
You can't have one without the other, can you? And I want to point out, for the long time, maybe it's just Americans, when we think of duels, we think of 6-shooters, but if it was a duel, it's most likely like a blunderbuss, not a rifle barrel at all. And if it took place pretty much outside the United States, in England, it's probably a sword. More duels were fought with swords than pistols outside the United States.
Us Americans, we like our guns.
Well, they switched to guns in the United States because we're a more equal society. No, I'm not even messing with you. A gun was seen as more equal. It is kind of luck. It could go off at different times. You could aim it. Rich people, upper class in England, they could get training in swordsmanship their entire lives, and versus a middle class person who most likely wouldn't be dueling is pretty much an upper class thing throughout most of history, pretty much all of history. So do you have someone who maybe spent their entire life practicing with a sword, fighting someone who never fought with a sword? Well, guess what? Guns kind of bring that playing field a little bit more even.
Everyone's a gangster until muskets get involved.
God created everyone, and Sam Colt made them equal.
Yep, it's one of my favorite quotes.
And this is something that I thought was interesting, Mike. You know who really wasn't about dueling?
I feel like there's a Mormon joke here somewhere, but I'm not quite sure.
Well, kind of close. The church. In most of Europe, church was against dueling for a long time, or for all the time, which is weird because of other things the church supported.
Yeah, I was going to
around
say,
this time.
I'm surprised with that.
I mean, like, it makes sense. The church should be against violence, but they've been for violence in other scenarios. But yeah, so dueling mostly over honor, mostly what people said. And it wasn't always a fight to the death. A lot of times, well, it was very rarely a fight to the death, but a lot of times just showing up to the duel, honor was restored. Like that was it. Oh, this guy's not a pussy. We're good. And then maybe there was, you do like to first blood or something was very common where they have their dueling swords, and it was very the code of dueling involved that both parties have similar weapons. They're the same weapons, which is why, kind of jumping ahead, but in the colonies, we'll call them, most upper class had dueling pistols. They had 2 sets of pistols so that it could be their dueling set, so each person would have a similar pistol, just so that you're not, different brands, different whatever, gives someone the advantage. It would be seen as ungentlemanly to be, trying to cheat, essentially.
Using a newest age gun while they're using a relic.
Yep. And this was a very formal event. Like, there was rules. There's a code of conduct, as known as the 26 Commandments, that was created in Ireland. It didn't really spread everywhere, but every area that dueled had very common rules about what you could and could not do in a duel. And one of the things that I thought was kind of interesting that you never hear about are seconds. And seconds, it always makes me think of like your best man, of the guy. So once the duel is spurned, so if I'm like, Mike, we're about to duel, that's it. We don't talk to each other. Our seconds, aka our best friends, go and talk to my second will talk to your second. My other guy, my best guy friend, will go and talk to your best guy friend, who's also upper class, obviously, because we don't discriminate in class. You have to be upper class to be involved in any sort of dueling. So they go and talk to each other, and they set up what weapons are going to be used. How far apart are you going to be? If it's a pistol duel, where is it going to be? When is it going to be? Everything. And since duels were in the later end of dueling, which died out not long after the United States was founded, it was illegal. So you really didn't bring anyone else besides maybe your second and a doctor. But you'd always bring your second, and your second would communicate and set everything up. And sometimes some duels didn't happen because the seconds just never agreed on anything. It just kind of fizzled out. And sometimes, very rarely did this happen, but occasionally the seconds would get so pissed at each other that they would duel too. So you would have a 4-way duel. You would have, it's like a plus sign. You have your 2 main duelists going one way, and then your seconds going the other way.
That sounds straight out of a comedy skit. And also the whole idea with seconds sounds like high school. Like, I'm pissed at you, you can't talk to me, you gotta talk to my friend, sort of thing.
Yeah. A lot of times the second's real job was to try and not call off the duel, but do as much as they could to abate the duel, right? So they would say, okay, what if this guy apologizes? Will it talk to your other second? Will he apologize? Can you get this guy to apologize? Because a lot of times these duels would be called off before they actually happened, or they'd go there and they'd just showing up, your honor's pretty much restored. And so that's really all you kind of have to do. And the seconds would try and keep people from getting hurt, because especially in the United States and England, where the pistol was the weapon of choice, you actually could get hurt compared to like France where you're using a pointed sword and the sword itself was dull on the sides, but the needle or the end of the sword was kind of like, sharp, and so it could draw blood. It was made for stabbing, not for cutting. So
I found that funny because stabbing is much more effective to kill someone than slashing.
yeah, but you're not trying to kill someone. You're just trying to get first blood. So, but it's kind of hard to try not to kill someone with a flintlock pistol. I mean, half the time you don't even know if it's going to fire.
Oh, God, that would suck. Going for a duel and all you hear is click.
Well, and the thing about the flintlock is you would shoot someone, or you'd shoot your flintlock and it'd go bang, and sometimes it'd take a while for the spark to get all the way inside the chamber and actually shoot. So you'd be waiting, and was it Andrew Jackson, the president of the United States, when he was in a duel, he let the other guy shoot first. He shot Andrew Jackson in his rib cage, broke 2 ribs, and the guy who was this excellent duelist was like, "Oh man, did I miss him? I've never missed before." And Andrew Jackson just raised his pistol and shot the other guy in the head. It's like, and the other guy was like a super famous duelist. I mean, it'd be like if pre driving off a cliff, if you just went up and challenged Tiger Woods to a golf match and then just fucking destroyed him.
Damn. So going against Michael Jordan in basketball and somehow winning. Gotcha. It's a snowball's chance.
Yeah, but he really kicked your ass in the beginning. A little Cinderella story.
Everyone loves an underdog.
But yeah, and so these guys, they'd go and they'd fight each other over stuff, and women too. And that's what I thought was crazy, because when you assume duels, you assume men, right? I mean, historically speaking,
yeah, I'll be honest.
Not most equal time in history. It was uncommon, but it wasn't unheard of for women to duel each other.
You stole, for some reason, a dumb joke of my man. You stole my man. I know I didn't steal my man. You left you, and pa.
Yeah, and so a lot of times it was something with one of the most famous examples of women dueling, which I lost. Anyway, it was about something like some woman said something to this other woman, or was talking about her behind her back, something about whatever, and she showed up to lunch, and the lady was like, "All right, we're dueling now." But I want to just kind of go over this story that I think is hilarious, and I found it in a few sources. Some places say it's true, some places say it's not, and I really can't confirm it. But there's Dupont and Fournier. They're both French generals during the Napoleonic War, and Dupont was sent to give a message to Fournier that was not a good message. I don't know what it was about, but Fournier was pretty pissed, and Fournier was like an excellent duelist, and so he just fucking went off. So he challenged Dupont to a duel, and Dupont was just like, "Hey, don't kill the messenger." So of course he didn't want his honor to be damaged, which it was, because he received a challenge to a duel. So they went and dueled, and they were still pissed at each other, and so then they dueled again, and then they left, and then they duel again. They had a standing invitation to each other if they were within 100 miles that they would travel to each other to duel each other.
That is extreme dedication.
Mike, these guys were staying in the same hotel building, found out about it, went up to the other guy's rooms like, "Hey, let's duel."
All right, I'll be honest. They just sound like best friends at like this point. Like, I absolutely love them.
So their first duel was in 1974, and they dueled for 19 years.
Wait, what?
They dueled 30 times over 19 years.
I'm still not processing it. It's still so confusing.
They fought with multiple weapons. They fought with several types of swords. And Fournier, who was a skilled swordsman, Dupont was like, "All right, enough of this. I'm going to get really good with this pistol." And he was tired of dueling this guy. He was like, "All right, we got to cut this out." And so he eventually was like, all right, challenge him to duel. He chose pistols. He injured him, and then they were like, all right, let's call it off. And so then they were kind of like you said, friends after that. It seemed like the only stipulation of when they wouldn't duel each other is if they were busy fighting war.
On the same side or opposite
They're
side?
both French. They're on the same side.
How is this not a movie or like a really popular book?
Oh, it is a popular book. It did become a movie. I think it's called The Duelist. I've never seen it, but people wrote about it.
I've never seen it myself.
But I think the movie doesn't take place during the Napoleonic Wars. I think it's some other time. I don't know. I don't completely know the whole thing.
But I feel like this is like a comedy movie. It's not necessarily like. I just did a quick Google of The Duelist, and it looks very more serious and more like a thriller. This what you just told me sounds like a comedy.
I think it's definitely a comedy, like not the movie, but like the event. But yeah, I think The Duelist is a serious movie. But yeah,
Because
it could easily be a comedy.
you said 19 years.
Yes.
That's extreme, and 100 miles. And this is back in France when their cars weren't even invented yet. So to travel 100 miles by alone is no small feat, considering most people live and die where they grew up. But to live and die, like, can you imagine like figuring out the same guys in the hotel room? You go, ugh, get up, get dressed, walk on up to his room, knock on his door, and it's like, fight tomorrow? He goes, oh shit, you're in town? Yeah, I'm staying in a room below you. And he's like, well, all right, I'll see you after breakfast. And then they
Yeah.
go and shoot each other.
No, they should make a modern one where it's like this guy like checks in on Facebook, like just checked in. It's like, son of a bitch, I got to go fight this guy.
That is brilliant. That is the whole this whole duelist thing. It's just brilliant.
But yeah, it seems again, there isn't as much history on this as there fucking should be because this is fucking hilarious. But it's hard to believe that they weren't kind of friends.
Oh, you have to be, right? After like being exposed to a person for so long and actually like knowing them on, I would imagine, an extreme basis, you got to at least like them at some point.
Yeah, you have to. And it's funny because this is I feel like maybe it's just all the cowboy movies everyone watched when they were kids, but I feel like in America we really regard duels not as like this really shitty thing that happens, but as like this kind of cool thing. And that's kind of what it was of how young people thought of it. To gain honor, you would duel someone to prove you're courageous. If you're like not a little kid, but if you're 16, which was a man back in the day, and be like, hey, challenge someone to a duel. And then people who haven't dueled, it's like, well, you haven't dueled. What are you, a pussy? You have more honor then because you dueled. So that guy called you a pussy. Now you challenge him to a duel.
Honestly, I don't think the world's changed that much because we still call people like, "What? You're not gonna do that, you pussy? Go do that." And yeah, like, and then they go do it. Now you go do this. I feel like we haven't changed that much, but god damn it, do I want duels to come back?
Yeah, I'm torn. I think we'll discuss it at the end, but if we brought dueling back, would it even change society? Keep that in the back of your head. But as we go further in history, closer to the beginning of the greatest nation, dueling was illegal in a lot of places in the United States, or the colonies, and the soon-to-be United States. A lot of people didn't like it. Some of our favorites, Mike, Ben Franklin, not a fan of dueling. George Washington, not a fan of dueling, partly because his officers were killing each other for duels.
Yeah, that'd probably make me not happy about it either.
And it wasn't an isolated scenario just during the Revolutionary War. Between 1798 and the Civil War, the U.S. Navy lost 2/3 as many officers to dueling as it did in combat at sea.
God, that's such a big number. 2/3
So it's less dangerous to go to war.
than hang around with a bunch of sailors. Good to know.
And these weren't like your, for the most part, high up there guys. These were mostly your junior officers. And the crazy thing is, like, occasionally some pretty famous people would die from dueling, but because of the attitudes on dueling of, you have to defend your honor, it was never really like rejected. It'd be more rejected to reject a duel, which is what Washington tried to turn it around. Washington, anytime one of his officers turned down a duel, he made a big deal of it, trying to promote not turning down duels because, well, he needed all the help he could get.
Wait, not turning down duels or to turn down duels?
He gave special recognition to his officers who turned down duels and did not participate in duels.
Well, it is sometimes the hardest to do nothing, whether it is to do something. So there is some strength of saying no, that is for sure.
And around this time, this is kind of the as dueling was ending, and America's most famous duel was between Alexander Burr and Aaron Burr. Sorry, Aaron Burr, Alexander Hamilton, when they fought each other, because at the time Hamilton and Burr, the two kind of popular figures. I mean, it'd be if Mitch McConnell and Nancy Pelosi challenged each other to a duel.
Is that bad that I really want that to happen, though?
No, I really want that to happen too. Honestly, I'd pay very good money to see that. So if those two challenge each other to a duel, and this is my favorite part of this whole story, it was illegal to duel in New York, so they had to go over to New Jersey where dueling was still legal. Classic Jersey. Now, unfortunately, murder was still illegal. And like we said, is mostly your seconds who came with you and occasionally a doctor. But Aaron Burr did end up killing Alexander Hamilton. And I'm not that upset about it. I'm not a huge Hamilton fan. But it was kind of a shock to the country.
Yeah, I imagine at that time being a well-known person, which is extremely hard to do, and then dying from a trait that is solely being weeded out through your country and the world, that's got to be a shock to most people at this time.
Yep, and then like we mentioned, Andrew Jackson got in a duel. But Mike, there's another famous American who got in a duel who I don't think you'll ever guess this one. He lived in our home state. It's kind of famous for it.
Abraham Lincoln?
Abraham Lincoln.
Yes! Is it back when he was a wrestler?
I don't know. In 1842, so what was he doing at that time?
He's probably a politician or a lawyer at that time.
Yeah. So he challenged to duel James Shields, but their seconds convinced them to not actually duel. I know.
I'm curious on who Abraham Lincoln's second is, but how much do you have to piss off Honest Abe to make him want to duel you?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, he didn't want to go to war over people owning people, but this fucking guy. But hey, if I know anything about Illinois politics, the guy probably deserved it.
Yeah, you're not wrong. You're not wrong.
So, dueling kind of died out after the American Civil War, at least in the United States. People had seen enough bloodshed. The last known fatal duel was actually in Canada, which is surprising. Yeah.
I feel like there's a joke somewhere, but I'm not coming up with one.
And many states and places that outlawed it anyway. So really is on its way out, and places where it wasn't outlawed, it wasn't seen as okay to do it anyway. So it was outlawed in 1839 in Washington, D.C., which is, kind of where, like, if you want duels to be legal, that's like the one place, right?
Yep. You said what about my state? I'm representing that state.
And dueling kind of keeps coming back in society. I mean, we see it all the time in movies, but in the early 20th century, in the late 19th century, dueling pistols became a popular sport in France. Now, not real bullets, obviously. And pistol dueling was a 1908 Summer Olympic event.
Can we bring that back to the Olympics, please? Please?
We'll trade power walking for dueling. I feel like that's a fair trade.
Wait, power walking is in the Olympics?
Yeah, it's been in the Olympics for like 4 years. Fucking lightsaber battles are in the Olympics now.
I don't want to live on this planet anymore.
If you can't duel, what can you do? So I don't really count this as a duel, but it's probably one of the most famous duels in American history. The gunfight at the OK Corral. Now, when we get to the Wild West, there really weren't that many duels. And by duels, I mean the standard practice accepted of duels of two men agree on a spot, agree on how far apart they are, have similar weapons, and show up at the same time and decide that they're going to solve their problems by themselves. Most frontier shootouts were, well, they were frontier shootouts. It wasn't
It,
high noon.
yeah, I would say it's more common to get shot in the back than anything close to a Hollywood version of a duel.
But the shootout at the OK Corral, it kind of seems like a multi-duel to me because many people report that the groups were apart from each other and they were shooting at each other like face to face, all at like an agreed upon distance at the same time. Now the actual shootout I think only lasted like 30 seconds or something, but this was probably one of the closest things to a duel in the Wild West that I could find of as an actual duel. Now it's probably one of the greatest movies ever made, but I don't know if it was if you could technically classify it as a duel. But I wanted to mention it because, well, it's a crazy story, and we'll have to do a whole episode on it some other time because that would be a good episode.
Yeah, and just because I'm a big fan of the Wild West and that kind of history. One, I would not say the OK Corral was a duel, but I mean, yeah, I could see that stretch. But if I remember correctly, Wild Bill Hitchcock, that's where the meet at dawn in the middle of the street kind of came from. I think he actually did that once, and that's how he got his name, Wild Bill. But I think that only happened like once or twice in the Wild West, and they still weren't exactly a fair fight, to say the least.
Yeah, and it's crazy that when you think of duels, or maybe it's just me, but when I think of duels, I think of cowboys. I don't think of 16th century knights.
Well, I do think of Robin Hood Men tights with slapping someone across the face with a metal glove. For some, like Mel Brooks, that comedy of he slaps me with a leather glove, I slap him with a metal glove. That comes to mind when I say I challenge you to a duel.
That's true. That's true.
But I'm with you, Nick. I think I've watched too many John Wayne and Clint Eastwood movies. I think Western all the time.
And it's just so weird that I looked and I looked because I was like, that no, this has to be true. What other lies have I been told by the council? But yeah, most dueling took place around the form when it did take place in the U.S. is around the forming of our country, not set in the Wild West, which is kind of unfortunate, just because there's a lot of great movies out there. But Mike, I kind of wanted to ask you, and I'm torn on it. If we brought back modern duels, all about honor, insulting people, not just killing people in the streets, like you, me, meet somewhere, away from the law, you, me, a doctor. Do you think that our society would change that much? Because I see a lot of similarities between dueling and Twitter, where someone calls someone an idiot, someone calls them an idiot back, and then one person challenges them to meet, and then one person declines, and then the person who declines lost his honor. Like, I feel like it's almost the same thing where half of having your honor is showing up, where you're just some guy doing dumb shit on Twitter, and then someone calls you out, and you just kind of get shut down. It's almost like dueling. Like you said, with the knights, sometimes you didn't have to fight the other person. If you just both showed up to the duel, your honor was restored. Because a lot of times people want to get in fights. They're like, you know what I value more than calling this guy a bitch? Living.
And I'll be honest, it does take a lot of balls to step into the ring. Whether you want to fight or not, just to have the courage to do that, you earn some respect. But to answer your question, Nick, yes, I think it would change. I know some states, or maybe not states, but cities have consent fighting where you can fight another person as long as a cop's watching by so you don't accidentally kill the person. And, a lot of people talk a lot less shit. But for, like, real dueling, I would say for modern society, non-lethal, like, duel with, like, tasers. So whoever shoots the other person first with a taser, I mean, you still win. The other person kind of gets hurt, but it's still non-lethal. That's where I kind of hope. Because, man, so many people talk the talk but don't walk the walk. And if you're not going to be able to walk the walk, like, back up what you say or don't say it at all.
Yeah, I don't know. I just, because, everyone's like, oh man, if we had, if you had to say that to my face, you wouldn't say it. It's like, really? Because these guys could get in actual gunfights over these things and they still said it to their face. So does the threat of violence really deter people? I don't know. I really don't know anymore. Just doesn't seem like it does.
Well, I know one thing, Nick, is we should definitely duel with some airsoft guns.
Haven't we dueled already with paintball guns?
We probably have already dueled before, but we should probably duel again. We should probably keep it going for like 19 years like the other guys did.
So we're at what, like 4 or 5 years now? 6 years? Shit,
how long we've... Yeah, no, actually, we're closer to a decade, Nick, of knowing each other. So
thank God, 9 more years. The end is in sight, ladies and gentlemen. Well, I'm sure there's a ton of other famous duels out there that I didn't mention that I should have, because it turns out every single duel is really fucking interesting. Yeah, once you get into it, I mean, you could really do an entire episode on every duel when you talk about who their seconds were, what the gripe was over, what weapons they used, where they decided to meet, if they had to cancel because of weather, because flintlock pistols don't work in adverse weather, so you'd have to reschedule if it was raining. It's a very formal thing. It's honestly a lot of work. You really got to put a lot of work into it. You got to both agree on the spot. You got to agree how far you're going to walk, who's going to call it. Yeah, I don't know. Dueling. Wish I could watch. This is something I wish I could go back in time and see. So I'd love to see the Andrew Jackson one, honestly. I'd love to see someone get shot and then shoot another person. Like that's
taking that out of context.
I mean, that's like Teddy Roosevelt getting shot and finishing a speech. Like, just...
You can't kill a bull moose.
Imagine just like, oh man, that's so crazy.
Yeah, I'm with you, Nick. I think duels are very interesting. Like, the psychology of it, the details of it, like you said. Like, God, I didn't even think about weather and flintlock pistols. If it's raining, you can't really shoot. Or just, what was considered an insult at the time, why people were fighting. That's a whole laundry list. That's like that could be a mini TV series.
We'll call it shit people killed each other for. Well, if you want to hit us up about duels or have a duel we should do an episode on, drop us a line on Instagram at Backyard Philosophy Podcast and on YouTube. Thanks for listening to the Backyard Philosophy Podcast. We rarely finish a podcast without missing a point we wanted to bring up, so let us know what we forgot. And if you have a topic you want us to talk about, let us know at Backyard Philosophy.